Wow. Oh my goodness. This episode with Sarah Martin is fab. It is one of my favorite episodes I've ever recorded. And it covers a broad range of topics, one of which includes a trigger warning for infant loss. So I'm going to let you know up front what we're going to talk about, and then you can decide whether or not you want to listen to this episode. Sarah talks about being married in like this traditional marriage in her young 20s and getting pregnant and then like not putting any thought into her power and just going to the hospital through prodromal labor and getting an epidural. Doing it again with Claire. So Ellie and Claire are two. But in between Ellie and Claire, there was a pregnancy with a baby boy that they named Happy that at the 18-week ultrasound found there was no heartbeat and she had to deliver Happy. And she walks us through what that was like. Then she shares how her life changed. She got divorced. She met her twin flame. And she talks about like navigating, like blending families without blending them, like living apart, trying to live together. A soul that just needed a vessel to be into this world, and how one person prompted her to research her power and to heal her trauma and to consider an unmedicated birth. Now, I, along with my partner Colin, had the privilege of being her doulas and walking her through this crazy, amazing birth story with her last Noah. So she birthed in her 20s and her 30s and then 40. I cannot wait for you guys to devour this whole episode. But again, part of this episode includes loss and delivery of a baby at 18 weeks. And so that can be very triggering. Please do not continue listening to this episode if that is something that your heart cannot handle today. All right, let's get to it. What does a contraction feel like? How do I know if I'm in labor? And what does a day of labor look like? Wait, is this normal? Hey, I'm Heidi. My best friends call me Hides. I'm a certified birth doula, host of this podcast, and author of Birth Story, an interactive pregnancy guidebook. I have supported hundreds of women through their labor and deliveries, and I believe every one of them and you deserves a microphone and a stage. So here we are. Listen each week to get answers to these tough questions. Birth Story, where we talk about pregnancy, labor, deliveries, where we tell our stories and share our feelings. And of course, chat about our favorite baby products and motherhood. And because I'm passionate about birth outcomes, you will hear from some of the top experts in labor and delivery. Whether you are pregnant, trying desperately to get pregnant, or you just love a good birth story, I hope you will stick around and be part of this birth story family. Before we get started, I would love to have you guys in Birth Story Academy. It is premier childbirth education for your hospital birth, no matter what the birth looks like that you're planning. So medicated, unmedicated, a wait and see attitude, a belly birth, an induction, there is a module for all of it. And I have a blank name tag at your seat waiting to put your name on it. And the best part about Birth Story Academy is that I get to be your virtual doula. You go into my private Facebook group where I interact with you every single week and cheer you on as you plan and prepare for the birth that you want, no matter what that looks like. So I hope you will go to birthstory.com and enroll in Birth Story Academy today. Hey, Sarah, welcome to the Birth Story podcast. How are you?
Wonderful. Hello. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm very excited because I love interviewing my own doula clients, which then offends Colin a little bit, because they're her clients also. So Colin and I were your doulas for your last birth. And so tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what we're going to dig into today in this episode.
Okay, awesome. Well, let's see. I've been in Charlotte now since '04, so like 17 or so years. I'm originally from Florida. I moved here right after college, got started as a teacher, quickly realized that wasn't where I wanted to what I wanted to do. So I got into real estate. So I've been in real estate now for about 15 years and just love it. Residential real estate, although right now the market is a little cuckoo crazy, but it's fun and exciting. And I love helping my clients. And
But yeah, if you are in or around the Charlotte area, go check out Sarah.
yeah,
So, realtor
yeah,
extraordinaire.
yeah, realtor extraordinaire. I live in Plaza Midwood, so I live in one of the historic in-town neighborhoods of Charlotte. Love this neighborhood. My house overlooks the park here. So, yes, I've got two older girls, Ellie and Claire. Ellie is 12 and Claire is 8. And now of course they have a new little baby brother, Noah, who's almost 7 months. And then my partner has two kids that are 12 and 7. So we've just got a full baby Brady Bunch crew over here. I was previously married. So the girl's dad, he and I are great friends now. You know, it's kind of it was a long road to get there, but we are now friends and wonderful co-parents. And he lives in Asheville now, but the girls adore him, and I love getting to have the girls here and help them with all their school and their gymnastics and all their play dates. And then yeah, so my partner and I, Jeff, we have Noah together. So it's just a really cool, blended family situation. And all of the kids, all the 4 older kids are just obsessed with their baby brother.
So, 5 kids,
Uh-huh.
and you guys have like birthed in all the decades.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. I had Ellie when I was, I think, 27, Claire when I was 32 or so, and then Noah right when I turned 40. It was it was basically my birthday gift to myself. So instead of going to Mexico or Napa for my 40th, I was on the couch breastfeeding a newborn. So yes, I've had a baby in my 20s, 30s, and 40s, and wow, it's such a difference to look back, hindsight, and see who I was as a mom for those 3 different kids. It's just crazy.
so we're going to talk. This is just a second trigger warning. So, you guys heard in the intro the trigger warning. We're going to talk a little bit about Ellie and Claire. We're going to talk about baby Happy, which was a loss at 18 weeks along.
Yeah.
And then we're going to tell the birth story of Noah, which is such a wild and amazing and incredible birth story that we were so blessed to be part of. So, Sarah, let's start like a little bit at the beginning, more ish before the births. I think that your story with you and Jeff is really interesting. So you just said, you're great co-parenting partners with your ex, but like, when did Jeff come into your life and what does your living situation look like?
Yeah. So Jeff came into my life when our oldest kids were very little. He and I worked together at our real estate firm and were friends for a long time, for years. And then, life is crazy and happens. And somewhere along, later along the line, years later, it was like, oh my gosh, I looked at this friend totally differently. And it's like, oh my gosh, I think there's something more here for us. So
You started dating?
We started dating, and it was great because the kids already knew each other. They already had a relationship and a friendship, and they were all great. And they were like, oh, cool, we get to see more of each other, and they didn't really put it together right away. So let's see. So that was several years ago, and we lived apart, of course. And then
Because you each had 2 children.
we each had 2 kids, and we each are co-parenting with different, with our exes and all of that jazz. Let's see. I guess right before the pandemic, we got engaged, And that was a beautiful, special time. We got engaged in Brooklyn, and it was 3 a.m. and he had been waiting with the ring in his pocket all night long. Well, actually, no, it was up in the hotel room. He made an excuse to go up to the hotel room and then come back down to the river. And I was like, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? Like, I think we should just be going to bed. But I didn't say this because he seemed really excited about something. So we get engaged. We decide to move into my house. We renovate it so that it feels a little bit more like us, not myself and my ex-husband. And so I move out, we renovate it, we move back in, we move the kids in. Whew, and that is where a little bit of struggle, I think, a two-prong, we started having some real intense struggles. I think the pandemic obviously was a huge piece of it. The pandemic started maybe 6 months later, and having all these kids live in my house, and the two littlest ones, his youngest and my youngest, we had them sharing a room. That was not a great idea to have a then, let's say, 6-year-old with a 4-year-old sharing a room, and they love each other to death. They really, really love each other. But when the littlest one was encroaching on Claire's space, that did not feel good to Claire. Like, this is my space. And so, long story short, during the pandemic, we broke up and we called off the engagement. Jeff and the kids moved out. He bought a different house, and we were not together for many, many months. And then we reunited. So I can tell you tell me how much or little of that story you want to hear.
Girl, this audience wants to hear all of this story. But the reason I picked you to come on, I had like 100 clients last year, and I very rarely have my own clients come on to this podcast. But I really picked your story because we tell the story too much of like, we met in college, we got married, we had a kid, and this is our birth story, right? Mm-hmm. Your story is so unique, but not uncommon, right? It's not uncommon to try to blend families and to find tension. It's not uncommon to try to blend families and get remarried, and like, it's all just like you said, the Brady Bunch at the beginning. It's like, it doesn't always happen like that. And so I really wanted to highlight your story and elevate it to show like how sometimes things are hard and can be dark and can be sad, and we can be grieving, but like, there's always light. There's always light ahead. So here you are, we're in the middle of the pandemic. I mean, it's COVID. It sucks. Like, the real estate market, like, don't even get me started on that. Like, I was trying to sell a house. There's no showings, right? And you literally do that thing. You get engaged. You're in love. You've been in love. You've been these twin flames in love, ready to start this life. And then the logistics of day-to-day life just shut it down. So you guys actually, it's the story we usually hear is like, and then we just kept living together and it sucked. But you guys were like, no, let's just separate.
Yeah.
And move into separate places.
Yeah. So basically it was, you have it all right. And basically what we realized when we were separated at the end of last year, so 2021, we let the day-to-day and the logistics get in the way of the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is, we love each other. We have so much to learn together. We know that we are each other's mirrors. We have grown together as individuals more than we ever have in our life ever. And so if we want to keep growing, if we want to keep evolving and expanding individually, that we have discovered that this relationship is the one that really forces us to do that, for better or for worse, meaning it is the highest of the highs and the hardest lows, but the lows, we are there because it's stuff that we have to work on within ourselves. So it's like, thank you for showing me where I still have so much pain. Thank you for showing me my wounds. Thank you for showing me this habit that I have that is just, you're not going to tolerate. And so I've got to look at it, or et cetera.
Yeah.
So the bigger picture is like, do I want to do this life with you? Yes. And it sucks. It was sucking. This is my beautiful language for the podcast. It was really a shame that the love story and the soul story was like not happening because it was really hard to live together, or because of the pandemic, or because of, kids and the blended family thing. It's just so hard. And I kept thinking, even regular siblings don't get along. Like, just, like blood siblings have a hard time getting along. And we're asking these two little ones that are not even blood relatives, and we're mad and confused that they're not getting along. Like, what the heck? That seems so normal. Like, there's got to be another way here. And so where we are, when we got back together right before Noah was conceived, and where we are now still, is it works better for us not to live together. And so when we got back together, we said, let's just love each other today. Let's choose every day. Today, I want to be together and I want to love you. And let's see how we feel tomorrow, and the next day and the next day. And what that felt like was not like it's constantly on the chopping block. Like, well, I'll just see tomorrow. It wasn't that. It was, I have freedom. There is space here. I love you. I love you today. And guess what? I would wake up the next morning going, I love you again today. And it was so spacious and free. And
versus you didn't take the trash out. Right.
Exactly. Exactly. And like,
you forgot the water bottle in the backpack. Right.
Right. And why were you 15 minutes late? And like, oh my gosh. And so he was here a lot at my house, and he had space to go to his house. And I loved it when he left. And it was just, the girls were with their dad in Asheville. He was doing something at his house or with his friends. And I had the house to myself. And I was like, this is glorious. Like, I love this. Have hip hop blasting, and I'm drinking wine, and I'm sweeping. And there's nothing better than like cleaning my house to music I want to listen to and no one's here.
Yeah. Not conforming to like these boxes that society and culture have just made up, right? Yes. Like, where like you live in your own house with your own lawnmower, right? And like your next door neighbor has their own lawnmower, right? It's just like this. We were meant to be in like bigger villages and community, and not necessarily like all packed into one place. You know, my story, my audience knows my story. My ex lives on the same property as me, but in a different house.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then that's what works. And then I have never shared this story on the podcast, but one of my best friends, Porter, her husband passed away very quickly when the baby was 4 months old. Mm-hmm. He was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and we were 30-ish years old, 33. And her oldest was like 4. So she had like a 4 and a 4-month-old. And Phil died within 6 months.
Wow.
And it was years before she dated again. But now she has a serious boyfriend, and they've been together for several years. And he has his family and his kids, and she has her kids. And,
I love that.
And they're doing exactly what you're doing.
Yeah. Oh, Sarah. I love to hear that, because I feel like I'm the only one.
No. And the kids they go play together. They swim. They go on vacations together. So the couple and the kids go on vacation together. You are not the only one. And I really wanted to share the story and these fun birth stories too, of like what it can be to parent across, like in your 20s and your 30s and your 40s, what it can be like to parent when we're married, what it can be like to parent when we're good friends, and also when we're partners. And sometimes we live together, sometimes we don't. My brother got divorced. This is like hilarious. My brother got married and then got divorced, and then they got back together and realized that they just couldn't live together. Yeah. So then, have been continuing to date each other over the many years since they got divorced. They're still together, but technically not married. And their relationship finally worked when they weren't married and they weren't living in the same house. They were able to be in relationship with each other. So,
well, do you know what is crazy is when we got engaged, it shifted something, and it was like this Reiki massage guy that I was seeing was almost like, Sarah, there's like this collective consciousness of all engaged people, and you're falling under the spell of it. and it's kind of going back to what you were saying about like societal, what these boxes that society believes in now over the last 200 or 400 or 800 years, however long it's been, this Western society thing. Who knows when this all started specifically, but he was basically like, it's shifting you guys because you're thinking, oh, we're engaged now. We have to do it this way. It must look this way. It must feel this way. And I was like, but it doesn't feel good anymore. It doesn't feel like what it just felt like 3 months ago before Brooklyn. So yeah, it feels really good to break out of that. It's exactly like, sounds like what your brother experienced. Like as soon as you're not married and you do things a little differently, it frees you up almost energetically to just be different, you know?
Yeah.
And I even thought that after the baby came that I would, like when I was pregnant, I thought, okay, well now we have to move back in together. And we started looking for houses. We started looking for 4,000 square foot houses. And thank God prices
So all
were
the
too
kids could have all their own
so all the
rooms.
exactly. That was a must. We had to have 5 or 6 bedrooms. Thank God we couldn't find it because like you, we were looking for the dream was like a duplex, like, you know, on a big piece of property or something, but in the middle of Charlotte, that doesn't exist, like on a half acre. So we still didn't move in. And I thought when I was pregnant, we got to move in, we got to move in. So we start looking at houses and we start falling into the trap again. And we didn't find it. And when I was around 6 months pregnant, I was like, okay, I'm going to stop. I'm going to stay in my house. I need to start nesting. I want to start unpacking the crib. I want to start undoing his clothes. I need to get ready. So forget about this other house. We'll just figure it out later. And so I chose, like, I'm going to stay in my house. You're going to stay in your house. You'll just come over to my house all the freaking time when the baby's here, which he does. And that's what we're going to do. And then I had peace in that. And now, you know, fast forward, it's like, oh my God, this is working out beautifully. So
there is hope for all of those that are listening that are in unique circumstances. Now, would you say this last pregnancy, was it planned?
So it's interesting because when we got, it's sort of, so when we were reunited, that's the word we like to say reunited versus get back together, because we didn't want to go back into what we were. So when we reunited at the end of last year, there was this baby fever going on with us. And we had been together for years and we never really talked about a baby because we had all these kids. We had the 4 kids and they were still, pretty young. And so it was like, if either of us thought about it, it was quickly, that thought was rejected because we were like, no way are we gonna, we loved our free time. We loved the fact that we had approximately 50% of the time just together, just the 2 of us, just as lovers and friends. And so to say that we're going to start over and we have 18 more years, we were just like, no. Well, then all of a sudden, when we reunited, there was this crazy baby fever going on with both of us. And we couldn't stop thinking about a baby. We couldn't stop feeling it. I felt physically like I have to have a baby. I felt like an addict. And I never really felt that before. I absolutely wanted kids and the girls. And we planned that. We said, let's start trying. Let's get pregnant with my ex. But I didn't really feel this physical pull. And with Noah, I told him, I was like, Jeff, I don't know. Like, I think I have to have a baby, or I can't, I hope I don't feel like this when I'm in my 50s and 60s. Like, this is a kind of this gnawing feeling. And he was sort of feeling it too. Like, he was even saying, we should have a baby. And we would go back and forth, like, which day, which week, who's more into it. And we both were really, really wanting it. And we were daydreaming about it, fantasizing about it. And then in January of last year when he was born, it's confusing all these years, but you know what I mean? Basically, It, like a couple months later, we were like, no, we just shouldn't. Like, we're being crazy. Let's just stop fantasizing about this. And then like 3 weeks later, I was pregnant. Or we found out I was pregnant. So
you were already pregnant.
I was already pregnant. So we were daydreaming about it all December. It turns out he was a December 31st, a New Year's Eve baby.
Mm-hmm.
In January, we said, let's stop being crazy. Let's just focus on what we have. Let's just be grateful for what we have. Let's stop doing this. It's getting a little crazy. And then in February, it's like, oh my God, I already am. And so
that
when I told
period didn't come, that's how you found out. Like,
Well, yes. So about my period didn't come. Now I stopped taking the pill when we broke up. So all those several months before that, I stopped taking the pill because I was like, I don't want to take this thing if we're not together and I'm not active right now. So I'm going to stop taking this. Cool. We reunite. I say, listen, I'm not on the pill anymore. So we've got to be really careful. And we thought that we were. And I have a little app on my phone to track my period. But because it had only been like three to 4 months of tracking off the pill, it really turns out wasn't that accurate.
And you were about to be 40, which we start to hyper ovulate and we start to dysregulate too. Like,
Jesus.
you know, so
Heidi, I didn't know that.
You drop eggs like, well, now everyone on the podcast does, you know, we start dropping eggs like crazy, which is why there's more multiples and stuff. And when you're a little bit, well, let's call it what the medical team calls it, advanced maternal age. But like, you know, when you 40 and up, like there's some risk factors for multiples and irregular cycles and hyperovulation.
Wow,
So
I did not know that. So I was always perfect to the day. Like when the app says you're starting tomorrow, I would start tomorrow in the morning.
yeah.
So when it said I have 8 more days until I'm fertile, I was thinking we got 8 more days and we're in Rosemary Beach, Florida for New Year's Eve and we're just having the time of our lives. And it's so it wasn't accurate.
Goosebumpy is what it is.
Yeah.
Because if you had never moved in together and you had never broken up, you would have never come off the pill. And Noah's little soul would never be here.
Absolutely. And we talked about that, and it was like we saw a therapist together for years, and I've just taken a break since the baby's been here, but he said, and he worked with us for years and years together and separately, and he said to us, you guys, this baby has been waiting to come in.
Mm-hmm.
And he finally saw his chance when you guys broke up and you got off the pill and blah, blah, blah. And so we feel like he drew us back together. This energy of like, we have to be back together. We have to work this out. Like, I cannot say no to you. Like we have to reunite. And the minute we reunited, this baby energy started, and it just felt so true that Noah's soul was like, you guys, stop with the nonsense, just get back together and just do this. Like, I really want to come, like, let's just finally be a family. And when I found out that that Sunday morning, when I took a test, and I took a test because again, the app said I was supposed to start, and I was waiting and waiting and waiting, and my breasts were tender, and I thought, okay, cool, I'm about to start. Well, then they were tender for 5 or 6 days. And I was like, wait a second. And it literally just occurred to me in bed on a Sunday morning. He and I were laying in bed, and I was like, oh my God, they've been tender for 5 days. What? That means something. And so I happened to have a test in my bathroom that I'd had for years, I'm sure. And I took it, and it said pregnant. And I came out of the bathroom like grinning, and I was like, well, remember what we were messing around with, that idea? And that morning, when we were basically like celebrating and laughing and crying, I had this overwhelming feeling of humility and gratitude. And like, I was just crying. Like, I can't believe you chose me. I can't believe you're coming into this world through us. I can't believe I get to be a mom again. Like, all I was saying was, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Like, yeah. I just felt so overwhelmed by like what this meant and who this baby was. And I instantly felt like this peace presence, like this Buddha baby, or this great uniter, like a harmonizing, like, I'm bringing the two sides of you guys together. This is just going to bring us together and be glue and be peace and be harmony. And I was peaceful pretty much through the whole darn pregnancy in a way that I have never been before, even with a lot of challenge in the pregnancy with our relationship.
I love that word, harmonizer. You know, yeah. I mean, gosh, what a beautiful way to describe it. So I want to dig into these birth stories because Noah's was very different than Ellie and Claire and Happy. And so I want to give the listeners kind of like a heads up. Noah's birth was completely unmedicated.
Yes.
Sarah's previous births in her 20s and 30s were medicated. And
Mhm.
so I also want to talk about the decision to have kind of like done it this like we've talked about this like one way in the box, the way society had kind of told you is the way birth goes, and then stepping into your power and planning for this like different type of experience with an unmedicated birth. But
Mhm.
before we can get there, we have to really understand Ellie and Claire and Happy. So, could you just spend a few minutes and just tell us a little bit about how Ellie's birth went in your headspace and then Claire's birth in the headspace? And I know Happy was in between there. And I'm going to ask you some questions about Happy.
Yes. Ellie's was my first pregnancy. All went great and well, easy peasy. This was 12 years ago. So this was 2009. I was in my late 20s with my first husband and taking myself back there to, okay, so I had prodromal labor for a couple days and then it got more intense. And so mild contractions started and then it got a little bit more intense on a day where I couldn't stop doing anything. Like this was a day that I went to Target and Bye Bye Baby and the grocery store. And I was like working my butt off until 10 p.m. And then so it's like, okay, it's coming, like there's something going on that I can't sit down. When it got a little bit more intense, basically her labor lasted outside of that prodromal, the real labor started and was there for about a day and a half. And it was so intense. And because I didn't read really any books, I didn't want to look at it. I didn't want to think about pushing. I didn't want to think about labor. I just read everything about the beginning of pregnancy and then babies. I skipped right over this third trimester and the pushing and the transition and all of that, because I knew I'm going to the hospital. I'm having an epidural. If there's medicine available, why the heck wouldn't I use it? I don't even need to think about this. So I didn't think about it. I didn't look at it. I was too scared. And so when it got more intense, I got scared and I thought something is wrong. Like this is not right. Like this is so intense that something is wrong. So I went to the hospital and they hooked me up to the thing and they can see that my contractions are going really, really high, but they weren't doing anything. Like they were blasting up, but over 12 to 20 hours, like it wasn't doing anything. So they had me walking, they sent me home. I was devastated.
Meaning your cervix wasn't dilated.
My cervix was not dilated. Thank you. Long story short, nobody told me that because I had had a LEAP procedure in college, that maybe my cervix, and you tell me if I have this right, that maybe my cervix was sort of like glued together.
Yep. Scar tissue.
Scar tissue.
Yeah.
So
your cervix does not regenerate.
Okay.
So if we remove part of the cervix, right, there is a weakness there or scar tissue there or a fusing, but it's not like we regenerate. Like if you were to cut off part of your cheek, right? It's not like new cheek is going to grow back, right?
Right.
So anytime in my intake form, listeners, the first question that we ask is, have we had any cervical procedures? LEAP, cryotherapy, a previous DNC, a previous DNE, any trauma to the cervix in any kind of way, so that we are aware if there could be a stricture or some scar tissue on the cervix. And nobody had educated you on that.
Oh God, no, nobody, not my OB, not anybody at the hospital, like no. So I'm walking around for a day and a half in extreme pain, not knowing how to deal with it. I didn't have a doula. I didn't even honestly 12 years ago really know the word doula, the world that I lived in. And I just didn't know what the hell to do. I wasn't prepared. I didn't do Lamaze. I didn't do breathing. And I just thought, when this baby comes, I'm just going to go to the hospital and they're going to help me do this. Well, they sent me home. So then I go back home and I'm struggling. And it was basically hell. And so I went back to the hospital maybe 12 to 15 hours later. And it was like they thought I was crazy, because I was like, I swear to God, these are so intense, and they could see it, but they're like, but honey, you're just still a zero. You're just still like not opening. So we're going to send you home again. And I was like,
drives me crazy, Sarah.
Yeah.
Advocacy. Have to advocate.
I lost it. I start bawling. My ex-husband doesn't know what to do. And I looked at that nurse. I said, I cannot go home. You cannot send me home. I said to her, something bad is going to happen, because I felt like I cannot do this anymore. Like I just want to, I was in fight or flight, and not that I was going to hurt myself, but I didn't know how to deal. I was like, I think I have to die. I think I have to hurt myself in order to get out of this pain.
And that is the definition of your body being in active labor, and how cervical dilation and progression has nothing to do with symptoms, right? Like there are other symptoms they could have looked at, like the position of the baby in the pelvis, by looking at your back, by looking at your bottom, by doing belly mapping, that kind of thing. Because if someone would have just gone in there and massaged your cervix and released the scar tissue, you probably would have gone straight to 5 or 6 centimeters dilated.
Yeah. Well, this is Heinz, like this is making me mad right now, because I've never really talked about this or understood it. I just thought this was Ellie. This was me. This was just how that labor was. And it's such a BS thing that like this had to happen for both of us.
Because every 18-year-old needs to be warned prior to a LEAP procedure, the impact that may have if they choose a pregnancy later on in their life.
Yeah.
Or if you had a pregnancy and then you had a LEAP procedure, anytime someone manipulates your cervix, we need to be made aware of the risks, that long-term risks that can cause on
absolutely,
future pregnancies. So
yeah, no,
I get angry with you too. I'm sorry.
So I felt like they let me stay, almost like with a roll of the eyes. You know what I mean? Like, okay, fine, you can stay, I guess. And I felt like a fraud, like, okay, thanks. I mean, thanks for freaking taking. And I felt weak. I felt like I can't do this, and thanks for letting me stay, like little old me. Like, I'm sorry that I'm such a burden because I'm not progressing. And they didn't help me progress. They just were like, just sit here then. So we just sat in a room and just waited. And then, so anyway, let's say 12 hours later, I was able to start. It was finally time to start pushing. They did have to manipulate some things. They did like sweep my membranes. They did give me Pitocin. We started doing all these things.
I hope that they did give you the epidural to take you out.
And then they did thank you. And they did give me the epidural. So then I was at peace, and then I was sleeping, and then it finally started. I think I pushed, I don't remember for how long, a little, like 45 to an hour or something like that. It turns out she was face up. So I always say sunny side up, but I don't know what the right.
It's called OP, occiput posterior. And we usually see an OP presentation, just a couple of reasons, but one, it could be like the shape of your pelvis, right? Mm-hmm. Another is if there's a flexed position with the uterus where the baby is hanging out on the right side. So I don't know if you can go back in your brain 12 years to remember like where Ellie was hanging out. But this is where, you guys, for all of you listening to Sarah's story, right? And hopefully if you have a LEAP procedure, to ask some questions. But spinningbabies.com. There are the parents' daily essentials. So things that you can do every day for like stretching and moving your body. And a trained doula or a trained labor and delivery nurse or a trained midwife or a trained OB can help spin your baby around by just different labor positions based on if the station of the baby where the head is at is in the inlet, high up, -2, -3, -4, mid pelvis, which is -1, 0, +1, or the outlet kind of coming out and pushing +2, +3, +4. Those are all different positions that help the head to rotate. So this is so normal, Sarah, though. Like, don't hold any tension on that, right? This is society. This is culture. This is our medical system. This is people not knowing what a doula is and not knowing what spinning babies is and not knowing what LEAP procedures are. And the constant messages that we get that say, you're a woman, and so like you can't take pain. You can't do this. Like we have this thing called an epidural. We can just give you all the pain medication rather than hearing you are strong. You are capable. You can absolutely do this. Everything that's happening in your body right now is normal and safe. And freaking little cervical massage, a little membrane sweep with a little massage and stimulation 30 hours earlier, would have probably helped that scar tissue release, And so the medical system failed you. It had nothing to do with you or Ellie or anything like that. But the reason you're telling your story, Sarah, today on this podcast is so that this doesn't happen to another person the first time she's going to give birth.
Right. Exactly. And I've done it both ways. And with Ellie and Claire, I just said, as soon as labor started, I knocked on the hospital door and said, here I am. Hi, big hospital. I'm in labor. Take me and do what you will to get this baby out. I didn't ask questions. I didn't care. I didn't know to care. I didn't know. They didn't ask me, do you want Pitocin? They didn't ask me, do you want this? They didn't tell me anything. I basically was like a blind, mute being. And I accepted it. I said, just take me. Here I am. And just do what you will to get this baby out. And that was not, I was not my own advocate. I didn't know. I just thought that's just what you do. You just go to the hospital and they help you get there. I mean, literally with Ellie and Claire, I said, okay, are you guys going to tell me what to do when it's time to push? And they said, yes, we will tell you what to do when it's time to push. And I said, okay, great. Cause I don't know. Then with Noah, I was just honestly from a little pushing from, no pun intended, but with a little encouragement from my cousin, she said, I want you to read a couple books. And I know you've had your two girls, but would you be willing to read a couple of things and I said, sure. When I started reading a couple things, I realized there was a different way. And I was like, what? I had no idea there was another way. I had no idea. I learned so many things. I became so passionate about it. So for my whole pregnancy with Noah, I was obsessed with birth, with pregnancy, with the baby, with the trauma, with the moments after birth. Everything became important to me, every decision. And it was the opposite of how it was with my first two. And I really can just attribute most of that to experience and age. And yeah, I don't blame the 27 and 32-year-old self of mine. It's that thing of, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And then when I did know, there was no turning away from that knowledge.
Yep. I will never, ever, ever forget this very influential church service that I went to. And I go to this very hippie, non-denominational church. And they put this slide up and they said, the number one reason that people don't give or volunteer time or donate, the number one reason cited is because nobody asked them to, right? Mm-hmm. And it as a doula sitting in this service, I was like, okay, this for me, it wasn't about volunteering to go fix a toilet at an 80-year-old's house. It was it was we spend so much time disempowering women that are pregnant. But like you said, just one person encouraged you. That's all it takes. One person to say, did you know that you are powerful and that you are wildly capable of giving birth with no one's help at all, with no medicine at all, if that's what you want for your body? Did you know that that's a choice? It just takes one person. So if you're listening to this podcast because you love birth story podcasts, but you're not pregnant, find that one person who is pregnant and make sure they at least know about their choices and their prompting. So I want you to tell Noah's birth story, but we cannot tell Noah's birth story without understanding the narrative of Ellie and Claire and Happy, because that shapes the way we have sex. It shapes the way that we show up as a parent. It shapes the way that we show up as a wife, a coworker, when things are done to our body kind of without our permission and without us being in our own power. And so I know with Ellie and Claire, you kind of said, you showed up at the hospital, do these things, give me the epidural, tell me what to do with my body.
Yep.
But there was a birth in between.
Yeah.
So can you just share a little bit about Happy and, you know, what it's like to try to recover from a late loss? So Happy was 18 weeks.
Yep. Yes. So in between the girls, when Ellie was about 2.5, we got pregnant with our second, my ex and I, and Ellie was my first pregnancy, first child. This was my second pregnancy. So wasn't really thinking of that about anything, any issues. When we went in for the 18-week appointment to find out the sex, I actually had my mother-in-law, his mother with us. We were super excited. We were going for the ultrasound to find out if it's a boy or a girl. She's in the room with us. The ultrasound tech is doing the ultrasound, like boy or girl. And it's going on for a long time and it's silent. And she just keeps looking and she just keeps looking. And I said to her after, I don't know, 30 seconds, which felt like 10 minutes, I said, where's the heartbeat? Because I'd had ultrasounds before obviously with Ellie, but also with this baby. And I was like, there's normally a sound. There's normally like the, and it was just silent. And so I said to her, I thought it was on mute. I said, where's the heartbeat? Where's that? And she said, that's what I'm looking for. And she said it really solemnly. And then all the energy just drained out of my body. And I was like, are you kidding me? You're looking for the heartbeat and it's been 30 seconds. And I just knew. And I just said, okay. And just all the air sucked out of the room. And she just kept looking and looking and looking. And I think I even told her, I was like, it's okay. I just instantly went into like shut down, strong, concrete mode. And she said, I'll be right back. I'm going to go get the doctor. And I was like, mother effer, and I was like, okay. And I don't even remember if I started crying or not. And then his mom left the room. I think she said, I'm going to give you guys some space. The tech comes back. She says, can you get dressed and come with me to the doctor's office? I was like, sure. I mean, I am just like pissed. My initial reaction now is just like pissed, concrete wall. Fine, I'll put on my freaking pants. Sure. So we go and we sit down in the office and she's like, I'm so sorry. And I think I cried a little bit, but I was more so just like, okay. So what do we do? And she said, and I said, do we need to do something right now? Like, how do we do this? What happens at 18 weeks? I don't even understand. And she was like my OB, who I love. And she was my OB for Claire. And then she was my OB for Noah. This was my first experience with her because I switched practices. She said, Sarah, I'm going to have to admit you. And I was like, what? So she said, will you go home and get some clothes and go home and can somebody watch Ellie because you're going to have to come back to the hospital? And I was like, oh my God. I thought they could just like do something at the office real quick, So we go home, I pack a bag. My parents start driving up from Florida to watch Ellie. We go to Target to get magazines, to get candy, I don't even know what else we had to get. Maybe we had to get something else. And so I'm walking through Target like a zombie and just getting stuff for this 1 to 2 day event in the hospital that I'm going to be admitted for. And we go, they give me the medicine to start the labor. He comes out.
Did they give you a choice, Sarah, to be put to sleep and have a D&C or a D&E? Or did they tell you that they would need to induce the labor and you would need to deliver your baby? Was that a choice?
No.
Okay.
No.
I am asking you that question, which I know the answer to, because each state has different laws. Okay. And I still am unclear. So I'm not going to come on this podcast and pretend to be the expert. I have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
It is something that every person who's pregnant should know, the laws of their state. If I find out that my child isn't going to serve at the 18-week ultrasound. I find out there's a heartbeat, but my child's not going to survive for XYZ reasons. Can you still terminate that pregnancy in your state? Or do you have to, right? Because don't get an ultrasound at 20 weeks. If the cutoff, like North Carolina, you cannot terminate after 20 weeks. So you better have an 18-week ultrasound if that's an option.
Wow. Yeah.
If that's an option for you. But I also know that in many states, they make you deliver your child if they are past 16 weeks.
Okay. Yeah. I'm not sure. And they didn't tell me. And again, I didn't ask. And I was just told, you need to come back and we're going to deliver.
Okay.
So I did, and we didn't know the sex because obviously we didn't talk about it in the ultrasound. And when he came out, or when I pushed him out and she got him, she took him over, she took him away just a couple feet away to whatever, clean him up a little bit, I suppose. And she said, would you like to know the sex? And I said, sure. And so she told us, and she said, it was a boy. And my ex-husband just started bawling. And I, again, was pretty stoic. And I think I went into shock. And I actually, during that labor, after that labor, I can't remember, either during or after, I was shaking so much that the nurse couldn't take my blood pressure. And she had to get like really firm and serious with me. And she like got in my face, like in a loving, like in a firm but loving way. Like I think she was scared. I just would not stop shaking. And she couldn't even take my blood pressure. And I realized looking back that my body was just in shock and I wasn't processing it mentally or emotionally. And my ex was crying about the loss of this baby, about the loss of a boy, a potential son. And then he watched me and got scared. Like the nurse was getting scared too. And he thought I was going to lose them both. He thought like Sarah's going to die. Like she cannot stop shaking. And she's like almost non-responsive. So that was super traumatic. And I thank God my OBGYN did encourage me to hold the baby. She said, do you want to hold him? And I said, no. And she said, I'm going to leave him here and I'm going to give you some minutes. And I really want you to think about this. And I would really love for you to think about holding him. And so eventually I did. And it was good. And it felt good. And I could cry and I held him and he was so tiny. I mean, probably the size of my hand. And I saw little tiny features and it was lovely to hold him. And then
did it help you stop shaking when you were holding him?
Oh, probably. I wonder. Yeah. I don't remember shaking then. I remember just focusing on him and just trying to like absorb, like just trying to, just sending so much love to him, And when we left the hospital, maybe the next day, I don't even remember. It's all sort of a blur now, but we didn't really talk about it. We didn't deal with it. I didn't talk to it. I was not seeing a therapist at that time. We didn't talk about it together. I just pushed it under the rug. And my ex, who is so sweet and a peacekeeper and so whatever I want, and like, just, really, was really so sweet. He was like, okay, I guess we're not talking about this. Hindsight, this was a huge, huge thing that we needed to deal with together and that I needed to deal with alone, individually. And I just again wanted to turn a blind eye to it. I do have the baby's ashes. Ellie, the 2-year-old, who was 2 at the time, named him Happy. Like in my belly, she was like, it's Happy. The baby is happy. Let's call him Happy. So that's what we sort of named him. My dad picked up the ashes from a funeral home and I carried them with me. Well, I had them at home, but if we would go on a trip, I would bring the ashes with me. Like it didn't feel right to like go to the beach without him or go to the mountains without him. Like I felt like I was abandoning him. And so I know that like the work that I have to do around that was that I felt like I abandoned him. And somehow this was my fault a little bit. And even when I got home from the hospital, I called up to the hospital at 11 o'clock at night and I was having a little bit of a panic attack. And I said, where is my baby? I just left. I just had a baby. Can you find him? Where is he? And I felt like, I can't believe this baby is like on some floor of a concrete building without me. And the nurse was so sweet. And she went and literally found him. And she said, he's in pathology. And as soon as they open in the morning, I'm going to go get him and I'm going to bring him to labor and delivery until the funeral home gets here. And I said, thank you. And I felt like this was like a baby that needed to be taken care of. And then, so then that's sort of how I treated it for a little bit afterward. Like I said, when we went out of town, he couldn't just stay at my house, like in my drawer by himself. I had to bring him with me. And so I did that for years until I don't know when.
Until you went to therapy.
Yeah.
And processed. This is totally off topic, but do you know if Jeff in his, before meeting you, did he have any losses with any women?
Yes.
Okay. This is where I'm going to say something out loud that like half my audience is going to be like, what is she saying? My mom had 2 abortions and 6 miscarriages.
Oh, wow.
And my mom will tell you, like, I'm this fierce fighter and I'm an advocate. And I'm just like, you know, my personality is just like, you know, the God of the whole world, you know. And I also have a lot of hypochondria, like fear around death and dying and things like that. And my mom will tell you there was 6 bodies and only 1 baby, like 1 soul. It was you the whole time, she'll tell me. And you were fighting and fighting and fighting to get here. And so that's why I asked that question about Jeff, because I wonder if, you know, potentially that little soul was Noah, but it just wasn't the right time in Jeff's relationship here and in your relationship here. And, you know, if that soul, Noah, just wasn't going to be here in those relationships.
Right.
You know, this is where I get a little like hippie.
No, woo-woo. I love it.
Woo-woo.
No,
I'm like, okay, everybody I know. But
I have lots of thoughts about all of that. So I totally resonate with that. Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, you don't deal with your feelings. You have Claire in the same manner as Ellie, like very medicalized, epidural, all that thing. And then we talked about your whole life changes, Sarah. You get divorced, you stay friends and co-parent, you expand, you grow, you go to therapy, you fall in love with your twin flame, and everything changes for you and you grow into your power because it was taken away from you. It was never given to you, first of all. And then it was taken away from you with Ellie's birth. Then it was taken away from you again with Happy. It was taken away from you again with Claire. And then one day, somebody says to you, there's another way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's go down that path.
Yeah. So would you like to just, where do you want me?
I want you to start with your preparation. Like, because we've already established you are in a good place, right? You've done the therapy. This baby you are so excited for. Like, you guys are like laying in bed and just laughing and giggling and cheering and, you know, and you're older and you're educated and you're in your power and you're a great mom, right? And Jeff's a great dad. And so like, now take me on that journey of just preparing. Like, you called me and was like, I'm going to have an unmedicated birth. I'm going to need a doula.
Yep.
How'd you get there? So
I had a massage years and years and years ago, even when I maybe just had Ellie. And this massage therapist said something to me about orgasms helping during birth. And I was like, this was back before all my life. This was the version 1.0 of Sarah. And I thought, orgasms to help during birth for pain. Whoa, this lady is wacky, but I love her massaging. So I'm just going to listen. And okay, well, I just shoved that thought away for 12 years. When my cousin said to me, who my cousin had at that time one unmedicated birth and was pregnant and getting ready to have a second unmedicated birth, and she said, would you be willing to just read a couple of books? I read a couple of books. Birthing from Within was one of them. The Ida May.
Yep. Ina May Gaskin.
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
The her child, the midwife, her book. Then I kept thinking about this orgasmic birthing thing that this massage therapist told me about like 12 years ago, at least. And I Googled, like, this is how naive I was, how sweet and naive I was. I Googled like orgasm for birth. And of course there's like this whole movement, this whole book, this whole movie, but I'm thinking like, is there something to this? Like this massage therapist and I just had our own conversation. So I Google it and it's like, oh my God, there's a book called Orgasmic Birthing. So I order it instantly. It comes the next day. I start reading it and I cannot believe that women are finding pleasure and power from birth. And I'm just like, what? Are you freaking kidding me? And my mind is just blown. And from there, I want to read this other book. I want to talk about this with Jeff. I want to talk about it with my girlfriends. I want to talk about it with all the people. And that book leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. And I went down this whole rabbit hole of all of these gorgeous books that were like, why do we birth on our backs? Why did you know that getting this drug leads to way more C-sections? Did you know that when the baby isn't on your chest that this happens? Did you know? And I was just like, no, I had no idea. And I was pissed off and excited and hopeful and passionate. And I just decided I'm going to do this it was like I was used to challenge now. I was used to growth. I was used to climbing a mountain and getting to the summit and celebrating. I had done that 100 million times in my relationship with Jeff. So I was going to do it again. And I'm like, I'll be damned. I'm doing it. I'm going to try this unmedicated thing. I'm going to do this differently. I'm doing everything differently in my life. I'm going to try it. And so I was determined and I started preparing for it like I didn't with the girls, right? Like the girls, I was not going to look at it. And this time around, I was looking at it.
And I will never forget my chiropractor, Lauren, was like, I've got a girl for you. She's going to call you. And I was like, okay. She's like, you're going to love her. You have to be your doula. She has to have an unmedicated birth. Like, I'm sending her to you. I trust you. And I was like, okay.
So Lauren was the second person. So my cousin was the first person to put a bird or was the little sound in my ear. Lauren was the second one. And she gently said, would you be willing to think about an unmedicated birth? Would you be willing to think about a home birth? Would you be willing to think about a doula? And she gently encouraged me just to think about these things. And so then I did, I started researching them. And I did even think about a home birth for a minute. And you and I had that conversation. So I knew that I needed, if I wanted to do it unmedicated, I remembered what it was like to be at my house by myself with Ellie, with just me and my partner, and it was how hard it was. And I was like, if I'm going to do it unmedicated, I'm going to need help. I'm going to need a doula, a support, because I couldn't do that Ellie thing again. And so that's when I called you and I just said, I really want to try this. And I know I'm going to need to lean on you. And what's still unfortunate of even the box, the societal norms, I still thought that me needing you was like a weakness of some sort. And it's just such a shame. And I just continue to remind myself, you are the village, you and Colin and Lauren and a midwife and an OB and my partner and my best friend. And you're all a part of the village, all a part of the tribe, all a part of the community. And yes, I can do it alone. And yes, it's okay to have you literally holding my hand or me leaning on you or you massaging my back. And it's not a weakness. It's just it's just, if we think back 1,000 years ago, there was a little surrounding of women helping women, and it's beautiful. And so anyway, it was a lot for me to process internally too, of like, do I need help? And will I accept help? Will I receive it? Will I ask for it? Will I feel strength in my asking? And that's what I learned and said yes to. And it was so beautiful.
And another word for help, I would say, is just support, right? At the end of every single birth, and I know you said it too to us, the birthing person leans in, and I remember this moment with you where you said, I couldn't have done this without you. And we said to you, and the same thing we say to every single birthing person is, yes, you could have done this without us. We're just here to be witness. We're just here to support, but you didn't need us.
No, you're right. And you know why that's true? Because I didn't even have it. My body did it. When you guys said it's about time to start pushing, I thought, well, first of all, we know that he started coming out without me pushing, right? It just was happening. But when you guys were like, it's happening now, we're about to start pushing, my body started pushing him without it started happening. So I didn't need you. I didn't even really need my consent. I wasn't like, okay, I'm ready. 1, 2, 3, push. It just, the force of the universe just started pushing him out. So I know that that's true. And I feel like I was a little more sane with you there.
Yes. Okay. So we have a couple minutes left. So let's just back up Noah's birth story. Because you were in trouble, girlfriend. Sarah snuck out of town. Jeff snuck out of town. At how many weeks gestation?
38.
38 weeks. My sweet little doula client, pregnant with her third, sneaks out of town. Jeff sneaks out of town. They don't tell their doulas they're going out of town because they know that we would have been like, oh, hell no, you're not going anywhere. So how did you know? So you're out of town.
Yeah.
And you're not with Jeff. Jeff is in a different location. You're at a retreat. He's camping.
Yeah.
But tell the audience, how did you know I'm in labor? I'm in my birthing time.
So it was 3 a.m. and I had my own little room. I was on a girls' weekend in the mountains. I was alone in the room. I wake up to go to the bathroom at 3 a.m., which is totally normal. I'd been doing that for weeks and weeks and weeks. And I was having, like, I guess we could say Braxton Hicks contractions, or I was just having like period cramps, which again was very normal. I'd been having those for weeks in the middle of the night, no big deal, very mild. So I go to the bathroom and the period cramps are lasting for like 45 minutes. Normally I can go back to sleep in 5 minutes. 45 minutes later, I'm still having these period cramps. And then they get a little more intense and a little more uncomfortable, like to where maybe, you know, in a normal, like when you're not pregnant, you're going to go ahead and take a Tylenol because the period cramps are getting a little ouchy now. And then it like occurs to me after an hour, I started to get annoyed. I was like, oh, just stop. Like, I wish these period cramps would just like stop. And then it occurs to me after like an hour, I was like, wait, maybe this is happening. Maybe these are not just random like practice contractions. So then it occurs to me at like 4:15 to download an app to start tracking. Like, so they start getting more intense. They start being like 5 to 6 minutes apart. Now they're getting a little bit more annoying. And I decide at like 5:45 to go ahead and get up and take a shower because I can't sleep anyway. So let me just start to shower and pack up. It's Sunday morning. We weren't supposed to leave till Sunday afternoon, but yeah, so that's how I knew, was basically these cramps that were getting more annoying. They were still just annoying, but they weren't going away.
Okay. So then I get this phone call that's like, hey, Heidi, I have something to tell you. I feel like I might be in labor because there's still like a ton of denial going on. Yeah. And I'm not in town. And also Jeff's not in town and I can't get a hold of him. And I'm like, great. Okay. And you said, what do I do? And I'm like, you get in the car and you start driving to Charlotte right now? I think we did check in, like how far apart are they? I wanted to make sure you weren't feeling pressure in your butt. We had a detour of Mission Hospital in Asheville. We had a detour of Gaston Memorial in Gastonia. Like I was like, okay, here's all the places you could pull over to have a baby, like if it happens on your drive home. But I was like, you need to drive home right now. It's 2 hours and I will meet you at your house.
Yeah. When you said to me, drive home this specific way so that I could pass 2 hospitals, I was like, what? Like I was in big denial. So we're driving, my friend Erin gets in the car. She drives me. I leave my car in the mountains. Our other friend Bobby is following behind us. And us 2 cars are driving down the mountain. We leave everybody. We text and we're like, it's like 6 a.m. And we're like, I'm leaving because I might be having a baby. Like, we'll call you guys later. The cramps get worse. Let's just call them now, where I'm having contractions. I cannot no longer sit in the front seat. I have Aaron pull over on the windy, stinking mountain road. I have to get in the back seat so that I can like stretch out and move around. And they are getting more intense. First, we were talking and chatting. Now I can't talk anymore. So even when we're still in the mountain windy roads, it has already intensified. And I keep calling Jeff and it keeps going straight to voicemail. And I'm so confused. And I'm kind of annoyed because he hasn't been turning his phone off at night for weeks because I'm 38 weeks. And so I'm in the back of my mind, it honestly was a distraction thinking, where is he and what's going on while I'm driving down the road. We pull over in Gastonia. So we make it a good way. We make it at least an hour back. We pull over in Gastonia because I have to pee. I lose my mucus plug in a parking lot in Gastonia. And I felt not very classy. I will say that, but that's okay.
Gastonia is not a classy place, so it's totally fine.
And I remember sending you a text. You and I were texting and we were checking in. And I said, I think I just lost my mucus plug. And you said, FaceTime me, because you wanted to see my face. And so I FaceTime you and I'm having a contraction where I can't even really talk through it. And again, in my mind, I think these are just getting more intense, but maybe this will be later today. Maybe this will be tomorrow. Or I even thought maybe this is going to go away. Like this might stop altogether and it might be next week, because I was still 2 weeks away from my due date. So I was thinking this might all stop. And I didn't. So mucus plug in Gastonia. Jeff finally calls. I'm like, I just start crying the instant I'm so relieved to see his name calling me. And he's gotten all these texts from you and me and Colin, and he's seen, as soon as his phone turns on, he sees all
like the doulas are like, where the fuck are you?
Yeah.
Please
and I
call.
love that I love that his last text from you was, he said, hey, I'm just seeing all of this. Where should I go? Her house or the hospital? And his last text was hospital. So Jeff to go is camping. He's by himself because I went on a girls' weekend. I'm like in the mountains. He's like, well, I'll go camping too. Why not? He's by himself. We have a Sprinter van that's like a converted Sprinter that's like a camper. So he takes the van to go camping at Green River Preserve. He walks to service in the morning to check his phone. He sees all the texts, all the missed calls. He's freaking out. He runs to the van to turn it on. The van will not start.
Stop it now.
Yes. The van will not start. He runs to like some area where there's more people, not so secluded, like at his campsite. He finds a mountain biker that's just pulling into the parking lot to go mountain biking on Sunday morning. He tells the guy, this is what's going on. My partner's in labor. Oh my God, my van won't start. The guy drives Jeff down the mountain to a car shop. They buy a new battery. He drives him back to the van. They put the battery in. It doesn't work. It still does not turn the van on. Jeff is so frustrated and scared and pissed that he throws his phone out of frustration, because by this point it's been like over an hour and a half since, oh God, no, it was 2 hours since I said I'm leaving my mountain house thing and we're driving back. It's been over 2 hours. So he's freaking out. He throws his phone, the phone shatters. Now he doesn't have a freaking phone.
No phone and no working car.
So the last So they finally get the battery to work somehow. They had to mess around with some wires. We find out later that there was an electrical issue going on. He starts driving down the road. It was a freaking mess. It was crazy. So the whole way home, this is going on while I'm not knowing where the heck he is, and you're not knowing where the heck he is. And I, in the meantime, make it home to Plaza Midwood. You show up at my house 4 minutes later. My water just burst in my bathroom. I'm leaning over my bed. You instantly come in. You don't even say hello. You just start pushing on my back. And I'm saying, oh, Heidi, Heidi, Heidi. And you're like, you're doing it. You're doing it. You're doing it. The labor progressed so quickly and so methodically. It was like one step into the next, no pause, no slowness, no time.
Yeah, but we're missing a step. When
Okay.
your water broke, we saw very light meconium.
Yeah.
Very light, which is a baby's first bowel movement. And that's pretty normal post-date, but it's not the most normal thing that we see all the time at 38 weeks. Mm-hmm. So I texted the midwife in your group and was like, hey, we're at home in Plaza Midwood. It's third baby. There's late meconium. Like, are you comfortable with us staying at home for a little bit longer? And she was like, no.
Yeah.
Come in. And I was like, okay, done. So I was like, Sarah, I know you wanted to labor at home and get in this birth tub that you bought, because Jeff had bought this like big birth tub and stuff. And I'm like, we just need to go to the hospital right now. Like, you are very far along in your labor.
Yeah. I mean, I was primal. I was making primal sounds.
Yeah.
I couldn't talk. I couldn't really walk.
And I told you he's not making it. So you just have to stop thinking about that.
And
like,
you know what? When he did call me on the road and Aaron was driving and I was in the back seat, and he did finally call me and he said, I'm at Green River Preserve. And I was already past Gastonia. I knew he's not making it, and I just put him out of my mind, and I wasn't upset. I wasn't mad. I was okay. I was just like, it is what it is. It is fine. It is. And I've got Aaron, I've got Bobby, Heidi is on her way. Colin, I know, is a phone call. Like, I'm fine. And I just accepted it basically. And I was like, okay, I'll talk to you later, you know?
Yeah.
And I kind of knew he wasn't going to make it. And so in the bathroom, when the midwife said, I would like you to go get checked to make sure the baby's not in distress, I said, absolutely. Let's get there right now. And you said so calmly and sweetly, who would you like? Jeff's not going to make it. I said, I know. Who would you like to be there in his place? You get a person, like, I'll be your doula, and you get another person. Do you want it to be your sister? Do you want it to be, your friend Aaron? And I just kind of sat there like, I don't know. And you said, what about Colin? And I was like, oh, yes, Colin. And I felt like I get to have both of the doulas. I felt so honored. And so you called Colin and you were like, Colin, I'm with Sarah Martin. Jeff's not going to make it. And you went, And I knew there was like words being exchanged that you couldn't say to me. And I'm in my mind like, I know, this is crazy. And so you're like, Colin will meet us there in 10 minutes. And so we're walking to the car, and I have 2 contractions walking to the car. In my room, when you were pressing on my back, it felt really good. In the driveway, when you're pushing on my back and I'm holding onto my rubber tire of my car, it feels like hell. And I say, no, don't touch me. And you grabbed my arm and you were like, Sarah, get in the car. The fact that this hurts now means he's moving down. Get up, get in the car. And I was like, I can't. And you were like, get up.
Right. I was like, we are not about to have a baby in the car. Like, double hip squeezes feel good until the baby is in the outlet of the pelvis, like plus 1, plus 2. So I'm like, oh God.
Believe how freaking fast this was happening. I mean, we started driving at 6 a.m. It is now 9 a.m. It was literally like 9:05. And I cannot believe this is already happening. And so we're driving to the hospital. All I remember you saying to me was, loosen your face, lower your shoulders, breathe in, breathe out, loosen your jaw, loosen, Sarah, you're tight. And even though I didn't believe it, I just kept saying, let go, relax. And I didn't believe it. I didn't feel it. I felt tight. I felt tense, but I just kept saying it almost like a mantra. I'm sure I was more relaxed saying it than not saying it, but it was like, do you know what I mean? Like I had to say it, but I don't know if I really believed it, but it was intense.
You were doing great, but I remember being like, okay, like there is no vibrator, there's no like we're not having time for like this orgasmic birth. You had prepared. This is the joke of birth, right? Like you prepared, you planned. We have a birth tub, we have like all the vibrators, we've got orgasmic birth going on, and then it's just like, you know what? We're in control of nothing. We surrender to the universe and our body. But what you were still in was in your power that you could do it. And we get to the hospital. We go to triage, which I'm like rolling my eyes, like, come on, hospital, get your stuff together. It's a third time mom. And she's like, why are we going to triage?
Yeah, I was yelling. I was, or not yelling, but I was like,
right.
Like, this baby is coming.
And this is very important. Audience. Sarah consented to a vaginal exam. And she was like 6 centimeters dilated. And I was like, fucking ignore it. Like in one contraction, you're going to be 10. I was like, you are in transition, because at this point, Sarah hears 6 and she's like, give me an epidural.
Yeah.
I'm done.
I heard 6 and I wanted to die because I thought I was dying. I felt much more in my power than with Ellie, but I felt like I can't do that. What if this is 5 hours? What if this is 5 more hours of this? I can't. And of course I could have, but that's what I thought in the moment. I start throwing up. I threw up like 3 times I filled up a whole cup.
Mm-hmm.
That's obvious transition, but I didn't care. I kept saying to you, I want an epidural. And you were like, Sarah, there's not going to be time for one. I said, I don't care. I want you to still call. And then I kept asking the nurse, did you guys call? I want it. And you were literally, so to your point, when she checked me and I was a 6, maybe 10 minutes later, we start walking to the room. I finally make it out of triage. I pass my stinking COVID exam. I'm done throwing up. I have changed. We start walking to the room. I start pushing in the hallway. Yeah. I squat down. Well, backing up just a tiny bit, when I kept squatting, the baby's heart rate was going down. And so Colin, I'm leaning on you, like we're slow dancing. Colin is holding my hand. Colin says, Sarah, the baby doesn't like it when you squat. Please don't squat anymore. I'm thinking, okay. And so whenever I stood up straight, the baby's heart rate was fine. So it was like, oh, back in the day with Ellie, when her heart rate was going down, do you know what they said to me? We're getting ready for a C-section. Not we should move positions, but the doctor said you are 1 push away from a C-section because of the baby's heart rate. With Colin and you, when I was squatting, it was like, oh, there's some pressure on the baby. So stand up. As soon as I stood up, everything was fine. So also in triage, before I started walking to the room, you get a call from someone, and I'm so out of it and delirious that I don't know who you're talking to, but I hear you say battery, and I hear that Jeff is still far away. I hear that he's still hours away, and I hear the word battery. And then I'm like, what? And then I said, it's something about his car won't start. And I remember saying, Uber, just Uber here. What the hell is going on? And so anyway, as we're walking in the hallway, I squat down again. And and I didn't even know I was pushing, but I guess I started going, and you were the one holding my hand, yelled out to the nurse and said, she's pushing. And Colin said, stand up, Sarah, stand up. And I'm like, oh yeah. And so then the nurse calls out, delivery in room 8. We need delivery set up right now. All these people start running. I walk into room 8. We're like 10 steps away. I walk into room 8. Heidi says, pull up your dress, pull down your underwear, pull up your dress, get on the bed, lean over the bed. I mean, we are pushing. I was in the room for 6 seconds before I started pushing.
Yeah. So crazy. But the big thing is I'm like, these dumb cervical exams and this dumb triage with a, I understand if you're like a first time birthing person, whatever, but like clearly by your signs, symptoms, your water's broken, there's meconium. Like, why are we in triage? Like, it wouldn't have been everybody racing to that room if they would have just taken you to a room. But you guys, Sarah went from 6 centimeters to pushing in less than 10 minutes. Yeah. Okay. Cervical checks mean absolutely nothing. Nothing. Okay. Mm-hmm. You can go from 6 centimeters. Oh, we went from Jules last year, 5 centimeters dilated, water breaks, 12 minutes later, baby was on her chest.
Wow. Okay? I have goosebumps.
So we cannot just take cervical exams and dilation. It's just one piece, right? Yeah. Station, the way you're acting. I mean, you were clearly in transition because you had planned for an orgasmic birth and we're asking for an epidural while vomiting. We were like, okay, we're about to have a baby here, I mean, and you did it. So when you pushed him out unmedicated, it's done. There's all these women in the room. So you're surrounded by women, tons of women, nurses, midwives, doulas, all the things. What did it feel like?
It was the most glorious day of my life, the most beautiful feeling. I felt angelic. I felt when I'm closing my eyes and thinking about it, I just picture golden light everywhere. The whole thing from 3 a.m. to 10 a.m. was magic and was me and was him and was women. It was Aaron and Bobby coming down the mountain. It was you at my house. It was all female staff. I didn't put this together until later. I did not see a man that entire day until Jeff showed up at 2 p.m. It was all women. And I realized that this was a huge part of what this journey was about for me. It was about, I don't need Jeff to be here. I don't need medication. I don't need anything outside of myself. And I am supported, and I am supported by the feminine, and the feminine is outside of me and inside of me. And my feminine nature, which I pushed aside for many, many years, I was while I was feminine looking, I was so driven. I was so career oriented. I was so task oriented. I wore the pants in my first marriage, all that jazz. I pushed away the feminine. The feminine rose up within me that day. Even I feel like the epidural was me saying no to the feminine. I did it. I freaking pushed out a human life, a sweet boy, a sweet baby boy that I had never had a boy survive before. This was my first boy that I was going to have. He is teaching us something about me being a mom and a woman and the feminine. And anyway, without getting all spiritual about it, it felt fucking amazing. And I was on and still am on a high from it. I feel powerful. I feel confident. I am a different mom. I know this. My postpartum was different. I didn't really have postpartum issues. I didn't have the baby blues this time. It just changed everything. It changed my confidence. It changed my connection to the baby. When Jeff walked in the room, he thought she might be pissed. She might be like, I can't believe you missed it. She might be like, get the F out of the room, and I wasn't. I was laying there with this sweet soul on me. And I swear there was like the beautiful light of like Paris was like in the room. Like it was the most beautiful light. And Jeff said when he walked in the room, he was like, I have never seen you more beautiful. And I just was peaceful. And I just smiled and I said, hi. And he like just started bawling. And he was like, you were fine. Heidi was there with you. The baby is here. You're healthy. He's healthy. You didn't need me. Like everything is good. He was like, it was the most beautiful scene he'd ever seen. And I felt all of the shit was erased. And I just was grateful and happy and blissed out.
Yeah. And today, Sarah, this story is that one that it's your cousin, right?
Yeah.
Prompting
Yeah.
you. Like,
Yeah.
and now you and all of your stories get to serve that for all the other women that are listening to your story today. And for that, I am forever grateful. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you for being part of the Birth Story family and listening to this episode. On Tuesdays every week are doula diaries, little snippets and tidbits from my week, along with some teaching and education. And then on Thursdays, we meet here for our birth stories and our expert speakers. So thank you for being here and listening to the podcast twice a week. And if you are left wanting more, like Heidi, I've listened to all the episodes, I've read your entire book, then I hope you will meet me in Birth Story Academy and let me be your online childbirth educator to prepare you for your hospital birth, no matter what that looks like. Thank you for listening to Birth Story. My goal is you will walk away from each episode with a clear picture of how labor and delivery might go, and that you will feel empowered